Seoul.
Well, let's get the views now of Associate Professor Robert E. Kelly from Pusan National University. Prof, the fallout from this corruption scandal is getting quite massive, and it's all throughout the South Korean establishment. Just recently, we heard about how the National Pension Service was raided. How will the nation's conglomerates react, do you think?
Well, I think they're probably quite afraid they're going to be heavily regulated in the future. There will be an election next year. The South Korean left will almost certainly win. They're going to win on a wave of public frustration about corruption in government, in the political class, as you mentioned. But it's also increasingly clear that Korea's largest conglomerates were in bed with this in one way or another, right? The last time the left was in power, they tried to crack down on the conglomerates. I would imagine that they're anxious about this in the future and that they're probably calling every political favor they have.
Professor, you mentioned there about conglomerates being heavily regulated. Do you think there's a crisis? Do you think this crisis is going to have an impact on business confidence, both within and outside of South Korea?
It will in the short term. I suppose a negative one in the short term, but I don't imagine in the medium term it's actually probably something that Korea needs. It's pretty well established, I think, at this point. I mean, certainly after this scandal, I think it's quite established that corruption is not just a sort of minor issue in Korea. It really is a major problem, especially at the top, where Korea's largest corporations and Korea's most powerful political figures are kind of all sort of in the same sort of closed circle, right? And there really needs to be a much higher wall between the two of them. Lots of outside observers have argued this for years, going back to the 90s and before. And if this finally pushes that through, if Korea's growth gets cleaner, that would be a major step forward. So I'm actually not that pessimistic about it, maybe in the short term, but in the medium term, I think this is an important step forward. It could generate an important step forward.
Prof, let's talk about that first hearing in the impeachment case that will be held tomorrow. President Park still has that presidential immunity for now. Is she in danger of losing it, though?
Sure. Well, if the Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court, affirms the impeachment motion of the Parliament, then yes, she will be stripped of her immunity. She will be stripped of the presidency. And then, of course, she loses her immunity. And I think this is one of the reasons why she stayed in office. There's a lot of discussion about why she's hanging on. Her letter to the Constitutional Court basically said she didn't do any of this stuff, even though it's now pretty widely understood that she was sort of a part of this tangle, right? And I think this is because she's genuinely concerned about going to prison. Once she's out of there, she's liable to criminal prosecution, and it's increasingly clear that her fingers are dirty, and so that's probably why she's hanging on. That's why she's fighting tooth and nail.
All right, thank you, Professor. Definitely all eyes on the impeachment trial tomorrow. We've been speaking with Associate Professor Robert E. Kelly from Pusan National University.